Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, an introduction to the world of Robert Herrick. Robert Herrick was sometimes called the last Elizabethan poet. He was hundreds of years later, but his style echoes the Tudor belief in a merry England filled with bucolic peasants. The two poems that follow use the idea that fairies are tiny and incorporate pieces of insects into their machinery. Note also that Herrick's fairies are Christians. They have priests, and they say grace. During Elizabeth's reign, there was a deal of comment as to the Catholicism of fairies, and questions as to if they could be convinced to break from Roman customs. Our reader today is Thomas Copeland. Thanks to him and his LibriVox production team. I hope you find these useful as Faerie Regions.
39. The Faerie Temple, or Oberon's Chapel, dedicated to Mr. John Merrifield, Counsellor at Law. Rare temples thou hast seen, I know, and rich for in and outward show. Survey this chapel built alone, without or lime, or wood, or stone. Then say if when thou'st seen more fine than this, the fairies once, now thine. The Temple. A way enchased with glass and beads there is, that to the chapel leads, whose structure for his holy rest is here the halcyon's curious nest, into the which who looks shall see his temple of idolatry, where he of godheads has such store as Rome's Pantheon had not more. His house of Rimmon this he calls, girt with small bones instead of walls. First in a niche more black than jet his idol cricket there is set. Then in a polished oval by there stands his idol beetlefly. Next in an arch akin to this his idol canker seated is. Then in a round is placed by these his golden god Cantharides. So that where'er ye look ye see no capital, no cornice free, or frieze from this fine frippery. Now this the fairies would have known, theirs is a mixed religion, and some have heard the elves it call part pagan, part papistical. If unto me all tongues were granted, I could not speak the saints here painted, Saint Tit, Saint Nit, Saint Is, Saint Itis, who gainst mad state placed here right is, Saint Will o' the Wisp, of no great bigness, but alias called here fatuus ignis, Saint Fripp, Saint Trip, Saint Phil, Saint Philly, neither those other saintships will they go about for to recite their number almost infinite, which one by one here set down are in this most curious calendar. First at the entrance of the gate a little puppet priest doth wait, who squeaks to all the comers there, Favour your tongues who enter here, pure hands bring hither without stain. A second pules, Hence, hence, profane. Hard by the shell of half a nut the holy water there is put. A little brush of squirrel's hairs, composed of odd, not even, pairs, stands in the platter, or close by, to purge the fairy family. Near to the altar stands the priest, there offering up the holy grist, ducking in mood and perfect tense, with much good do't him reverence. The altar is not here foursquare, nor in a form triangular, nor made of glass, or wood, or stone, but of a little transverse bone, which boys and bruckled children call, playing for points and pins, cockall, whose linen drapery is a thin, subtle, and ductile codling skin, which o'er the board is smoothly spread with little seal-work damasked. The fringe that circumbinds it, too, is spangle-work of trembling dew, which, gently gleaming, makes a show like frostwork glittering on the snow. Upon this fetuous board doth stand something for showbread, and at hand, just in the middle of the altar, upon an end the fairy psalter, graced with the trout-fly's curious wings, which serve for watch-at-ribbonings. Now we must know the elves are led right by the rubric which they read, and if report of them be true, they have their text for what they do. Ay, and their book of canons too, and as Sir Thomas Parson tells, they have their book of articles. And if that fairy knight not lies, they have their book of homilies, and other scriptures that design a short but righteous discipline. The basin stands the board upon to take the free oblation, a little pin dust, which they hold more precious than we prize our gold, which charity they give to many poor of the parish, if there's any. Upon the ends of these neat rails, hatched with the silver light of snails, the elves in formal manner fix 2 pure and holy candlesticks, in either which a tall small bent burns for the altar's ornament. For sanctity they have to these their curious copes and surplices of cleanest cobweb, hanging by in their religious vestry. They have their ashpans and their brooms to purge the chapel and the rooms. There are many mumbling mass-priests here, and many a dapper chorister. Their ushering vergers here likewise, their canons and their chaunteries. Of cloister monks they have enow, ay, and their abbey lovers too, and if their legend do not lie, they much affect the papacy. And since the last is dead, there's hope elve Boniface shall next be pope. They have their cups and chalices, their pardons and indulgences, their beads of nits, bells, books, and wax candles, forsooth, and other knacks, their holy oil, their fasting spittle, their sacred salt here not a little, dry chips, old shoes, rags, grease, and bones, beside their fumigations, and many a trifle too, and trinket, and for what use scarce man would think it. Next then, upon the chanter's side, an apple's core is hung up, dried, with rattling kernels, which is rung to call to morn and evensong. The saint, to which the most he prays, and offers incense nights and days, the Lady of the Lobster is, whose foot-pace he doth stroke and kiss, and humbly chives of saffron brings for his most cheerful offerings. When after these he's paid his vows, he lowly to the altar bows, and then he dons the silkworm's shed, like a Turk's turban on his head, and reverently departeth thence, hid in a cloud of frankincense, and by the glowworm's light well guided, goes to the feast that's now provided. 40. Oberon's Feast. Shapcot. To thee the fairy state I with discretion dedicate, because thou prizest things that are curious and unfamiliar. Take first the feast. These dishes gone, we'll see the fairy court anon. A little mushroom table spread, after short prayers they set on bread, a moon-parched grain of purest wheat, with some small glittering grit, to eat his choice bits with. Then, in a trice, they make a feast less great than nice. But all this while his eye is sarved, we must not think his ear was starved. That there was in place to stir his spleen the churring grasshopper, the merry cricket, puling fly, the piping gnat for minstrelsy. And now we must imagine first the elves present to quench his thirst a pure seed-pearl of infant dew, brought and besweetened in a blue and pregnant violet. Which done, his kittling eyes begin to run quite through the table, where he spies the horns of papery butterflies, of which he eats, and tastes a little of that we call the cuckoo spittle. A little fuzzball pudding stands by, yet not blessed by his hands, that was too coarse. But then forthwith he ventures boldly on the pith of sugared rush, and eats the sag and well-bestrutted bee's sweet bag, gladding his palate with some store of emmet's eggs. What would he more but beards of mice, a newt stewed thigh, a bloated earwig, and a fly, with the red-capped worm that's shut within the concave of a nut, brown as his tooth. A little moth late fattened in a piece of cloth, with withered cherries, mandrake's ears, mole's eyes. To these the slain stag's tears, the unctuous dewlaps of a snail, the broke heart of a nightingale, o'ercome in music, with a wine ne'er ravished from the flattering vine, but gently pressed from the soft side of the most sweet and dainty bride, brought in a dainty daisy, which he fully quaffs up, to bewitch his blood to height. This done, commended grace by his priest, the feast is ended.
Your saga may vary.